Good morning, Bucknutters. It is Thursday, May 17th, 2018. I am Dan Rubin. This is the Bucknuts Morning 5 and change, coming to you from a sunny Gem City, normally on Thursdays, joined by Steve Wolfong, Director of Recruiting for 24/7 Sports. Steve is on a well-deserved vacation. Another man who deserves a vacation but won't take it, the Dean himself, Bill Kurelic, joins us today. Bill, how are you?
Doing very well in a very sunny Columbus this morning. You know, we went right from winter, at least here in Columbus, from winter to summer. I'm not sure there was anything in between. So we got 75 and sunny today in Columbus, and I'm loving it.
Yeah, there was no spring in Ohio. Shocker. There will be no Joe Burrow in Ohio, it doesn't look like. I guess it's possible he could choose one of the other Ohio schools eventually. We have been following the Joe Burrow transfer and now Joe Burrow's next destination fastidiously. The most connected person for us on this story is one Bill Kurelic. So we will get to recruiting and some interesting Big Ten battles that are going on for some certain recruits. But first, Bill, what would be Bucknuts without some quarterback chatter about Joe Burrow? Can you give everybody kind of the latest of where you think it stands? You don't need to name schools by specifics, but in terms of a timeline, where do you think Joe is right now?
Well, I think, that it's going to come down in all likelihood within the next week. And if it doesn't, that means that more schools are going to be entered into the running. Right now, we know, of course, that he visited Cincinnati to begin with. We know he visited LSU, and we know both of those schools would love to have Joe. North Carolina came into the picture, and that's pretty much where it stands right now. Those three schools. Again, I was a little surprised that he didn't end up deciding after the Cincinnati and LSU visits, but he's got options, and that's a good thing for Joe to have options. And now he's going to weigh those options, and we'll see. Maybe he comes up with another school or two. As I mentioned, again, there are schools out there that are interested in Joe, as they should be. He's a very good quarterback. So, again, my gut feeling is that we will know within a week of where he's headed. But if we don't, it just means that he's going to continue to look at schools and weigh his options and decide what's best for him. The thing that makes Joe, in particular, so enticing is that he has those 2 years. Usually grad transfers are for 1 year, but Joe's got those two, and that makes him especially enticing to schools.
So what do you think he's looking for in a school specifically, if you know that? And do you think the Burrow family is looking for a guarantee of playing time and a starting spot, given the fact that he did not have that here and he doesn't want to get into another battle?
Well, we all know that Joe's dad is the defensive coordinator at Ohio U, so he knows how things are. He knows that a program is not going to guarantee someone the job before they even step on campus. That just, that gets you in a lot of problems when you start doing something like that. Having said that, they're certainly going to look for a situation that Joe's going to play. I mean, and to be honest, he's an outstanding quarterback, and most schools, so many schools would love to have him. He's out. Ohio State did not want to lose him. Obviously, they would have loved for him to stay at Ohio State. But in the recruiting world, when you start promising starting positions, you're going to get yourself in trouble. And I don't care if it's a high school player or a grad transfer or whatever. Junior college, whatever the case may be, the good programs don't promise starting positions. They promise the opportunity to start, but they don't promise the position. And I think in Joe's case, they know that. His dad is an outstanding college football coach. He's been around the game for a long time. But the schools are going to map out their situation, and the Burrows are going to be able to tell, this is a good situation or this one may not be quite as good a situation. I think the bottom line is he's going to look for a school that he feels very comfortable with and that he feels like he has a great chance to impact very quickly at that school.
Given what you know about Burrow and the suitors, where do you think he should go?
Well, I've done this a long time, and I never want to say where I think somebody should go. In my 30-plus years, I've never told someone, well, I think this is the place you should be. I just won't do that. It's the same thing. If it doesn't work out, then someone may say, well, you told me to go there. You thought that was the place. I just won't do that. But having said that, I think that the three schools that Joe is looking at, all of them are outstanding possibilities for him. You've got Cincinnati, you got LSU. Both those schools would love to have him. You've got North Carolina, and certainly I'm sure that North Carolina can say, well, look what Mitch Trubisky did here, where it got him. As in the NFL draft. So I think they're all outstanding situations for him. And I think he's going to end up, again, if it doesn't go any farther, I think he's going to end up picking the one he feels most comfortable with and the one that he has a chance to excel at the highest level at. We'll see what that decision is. At one point, to be honest, I thought it was going to be Cincinnati. I still think it could be Cincinnati. But we'll see. LSU really rolled out the red carpet for him as an example when he made that visit down there. So we'll see what he decides.
And the 2-year thing is actually interesting here for another reason, because I think when you're a grad transfer, you really don't have to worry about the coaching staff leaving because you're only going to be there a year. Stability of the coaching staff is important. The last thing I think he would want to do is jump on the last year of someone's regime like Ed Orgeron at LSU. I don't know enough about that to think that's possible, but Luke Fickell does seem pretty stable in Cincinnati. Okay, we'll now move on to recruiting. I will admit I'm scared of Penn State. And then I did a little research this morning, and it turns out I probably shouldn't be as scared as I am. Yes, they're in the mix for several recruits, but I've realized this is just my fascination with Brandon Smith, the defensive end, werewolf out of Mineral, Virginia, and it looks like he's going to Penn State, and Ohio State wanted him very badly. They could still get him. But what we're going to do today is go over a couple recruits that Penn State, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Michigan State will be battling Ohio State out for. Let's start with Penn State. 3 guys, Brandon Smith, Cameron Kelly, and Zack Harrison. How worried should I be that Franklin will pull off a triple here?
Well, I don't think he's going to get all 3. And, last year, so many people were worried about Ohio State losing both Tyreek Smith, the outstanding defensive end that signed with the Buckeyes, and then Jason Oweh from New Jersey, that so many people were extremely worried that Penn State was going to land both of those guys, as well as, of course, Micah Parsons. Well, they did get Jason Oweh, but as we know, Ohio State got Tyreek Smith. I felt all along Ohio State, they were going to split on that. Ohio State was going to get one of those 2, Oweh or Smith, and Penn State would get one, and that's kind of that is what happened. So same thing this year. I don't think all 3 of those guys are going to end up at Penn State, but it's not out of the question. I mean, they all are highly considering Penn State. If you look at the crystal ball, you've got Brandon Smith and Cameron Kelly. Last I checked, I believe they were both 100% for Penn State. So, we'll see, and I think that in all likelihood that's what's going to happen with those 2. But in the case of Harrison, you've got the opposite. You've got Ohio State as the school for Zack Harrison to end up picking. Is it going to be Ohio State for Zack Harrison? I don't know for sure right now. Nobody knows for sure right now because Zack doesn't know for sure right now. He and his family are continuing to look at their options. They're going to make official visits to both Michigan and Ohio State in June. They've already been to Penn State. Maybe they take an official visit to Clemson. We'll see how that plays out. But right now I'm going to still go with Ohio State winning out over Zack Harrison. But again, anybody that just assumes because he's a local kid that he's going to Ohio State is making the wrong assumption there. The Harrisons are doing their homework. They're doing their research. Just that I feel in the end, and that's from talking to a lot of people at Orange, that Ohio State has the best chance to end up winning that battle.
Zack Harrison, of course, attends the prestigious Olentangy Orange. Only the wealthy and famous attend that school, Bill, as you well know.
And I can see it over the horizon from my office here in suburban Orange High School area.
From the Kurelic compound, you can see the school. Yes, the palatial estate looks out over the ridge and can see all the littles down the hill. You mentioned Michigan for Harrison. Another Ohioan that they already had in the mix that Ohio State would like to probably flip is Nolan Rumler, the offensive lineman out of Akron-Hoban, but that's going to be a tall task.
Yeah, Ohio State's still recruiting him. He has toyed with the idea of visiting Ohio State. Again, he was there before he committed to Michigan. He has brought up and thought about the idea of possibly visiting Ohio State again. It hasn't happened. Will it still happen? I don't know. But as you mentioned, Dan, it's going to be a hard flip for the Ohio State to get on that one. He's from Michigan. His family certainly have been Michigan fans. He committed there obviously early. We'll see what happens, but I think right now, even though Ohio State, they just don't give up on kids. They continue to recruit him and recruit Nolan, and we'll see. But again, I think that that's going to be a hard flip for Ohio State. And the good news for the Buckeyes is that even if they don't flip him, they are doing very well on the offensive line, and I do expect them to end up with an outstanding group of offensive linemen in this recruiting class.
Starting with Doug Nestor, who's already in the mix, which is nice. Quarterback has been a major discussion here. I don't know if I've ever seen a class where it just seems like there's just an overall dearth of big-time QBs. Interesting because the state of Georgia alone in the last cycle was probably better than the country. Ohio State does have a quarterback they like, Graham Mertz, but he's committed to Wisconsin. So another Big Ten team with a guy Ohio State wants. Well, what do you think the chances are Ohio State flips Graham?
Slim and none, to be honest. I don't think it's out of the question, but I've long said that I will be very surprised if he changes his commitment from Wisconsin. He did make a visit to Ohio State. He stopped at Ohio State earlier this spring, and like I've said many times, if Ohio State gets a guy on campus, it almost always gives them a shot. So I'm not going to totally rule out a flip, but right now, he hasn't done or said anything that would really make me think that he's going to flip from Wisconsin. So until he does, I'm going to keep Wisconsin. I'm going to stay with Wisconsin for his ultimate destination.
It will certainly be a bizarre recruiting cycle for quarterbacks if the two guys Ohio State wanted ended up at Texas Christian and Wisconsin. I think that's an indictment of the quarterback class, but go ahead.
Yeah, and the Texas Christian one with
Max
Duggan. Yeah, that was one that a lot of people early on did not see that one coming, and just from talking to people at TCU that were kind of in the know, they felt kind of a quiet confidence that they were going to get him, and lo and behold, they did get him, and he's going to be an outstanding quarterback for TCU, and he's a guy that Ohio State, as we know, Dan, was highly interested in.
Yep. I won't say it, and I don't know if Bill will, but I think he was number one quarterback on their board. The last guy I want to talk about is a Michigan State battle. We're trying to go over here the big in-conference battles, and that's Devontae Dobbs, the offensive lineman out of Michigan, Belleville. Michigan State or Ohio State?
Well, right now I'm going to go with Michigan State. I've talked to Devontae many times, including just recently up in Massillon at the opening regional, and yeah, he is absolutely considering Ohio State. But you talk about a kid that plays his cards close to the vest. It's almost impossible. You almost have to pry it out of him to get Devontae to talk about anything remotely related to leaders. He just doesn't like to do that. So you've got to kind of talk to him and those around him and all. And right now, I think it's Michigan State. And could Ohio State change that? Yeah, I think they have a chance. It's just going to kind of depend on how things go with visiting Ohio State at all. I think he is going to take an official visit to Ohio State. That would be my gut feeling just from talking to him. He hasn't decided that for sure. He wants to kind of take his official visits to schools farther away. He feels like he can get to Michigan State, for instance, anytime he wants. That's no problem. So he's looking at his official visits at schools farther away. You know, we talked about, is Ohio State far enough away to take an official visit? And my gut feeling is that he probably will take an official visit to Ohio State. And, again, you know, when Ohio State gets those guys on campus for official visits, they do a fantastic job. And if they can get him on campus for an official visit, then certainly I think they've got a realistic chance at changing what I think at this point is a lean towards the Spartans.
Bill, once again, you provided more detail than any other human could. Why don't you let the Bucknutters know what you're working on for today and maybe tease what we got coming up?
Well, what else but quarterback news? I'm going to have a little bit of news on, hopefully a little more news on Jack Miller, for instance, and hopefully a little bit more news on Joe Burrow. We'll see. Again, that's what I'm working on at this point. And then it may be that I throw this out lightly, I guess. A crystal ball prediction, perhaps, at least today or tomorrow, could be on the agenda, and that's all I'll say about that for right now.
And we all know what happens. If Bill puts a crystal ball in for somebody, there's a chance he's already taking classes. I hope you enjoyed it. Have a good one, Bucknutters.
Fight.